Does Xiaomi have the smaller premium phone champion this year? Yeah, I think they might. We can abbreviate a little of this conversation since the Xiaomi 14 was released in China last year. We know a lot about how this hardware is gonna work. Opening the conversation up and seeing this get an international release, Xiaomi delivers a brutally competitive option for the folks who want a somewhat smaller, nice phone. It's just a hair taller than an S24 or an iPhone 15. Following in the footsteps of the Xiaomi 13, we retain the flat sides and the flat screen. I'm happy to see that, as I prefer flat screens and I like getting a good grip on my phones, especially when we're using the cameras. The general look is nearly identical to last year's phone. The main difference is the much larger camera bulge on the back, which we'll talk about these cameras in just a bit. A few of the other specs that people might not immediately notice unless the two are side by side. I'm happy to see a resolution bump on the Xiaomi 14. Not quite 1440p, but still higher than 1080p. Now, some folks out there might feel this is placebo resolution on a phone this size, or that 1080p is good enough for average consumers. But I'm happy to see premium devices picking these kinds of specs back up. 1440p used to be mandatory on phones like the LG G8 and Galaxy S10. The screen brightness is also improved. You'll probably notice that a bit more directly, though the differences aren't going to be radically noticeable. You can see the difference when you've got two phones side by side. And while I was unboxing the 14, I was a little upset. There's like no hole, or there's no like circle or port on the top casing. I thought they might have gotten rid of the IR blaster on the top of the phone, but that's been moved to the rear, which is kind of brilliant if you think about it, because you hold the phone upright to use it as a universal remote, and you can see the screen and controls a lot better. And another major upgrade, the 14 gets proper USB 3.2 support and can finally output video through the USB port. Without really changing the overall dimensions much, we also get a tiny battery nudge over the 13. This is a little phone with a very powerful chip, and I was pleasantly surprised by the runtime. I didn't feel too far off from the OnePlus 12 using it as a daily communicator. And it's really easy to get this phone to last past a full day of use, and the charging speeds got a big upgrade over the 13. This is now trading blows with my OnePlus 12. From completely empty to completely full, the phone charges in roughly 30 minutes, and only about 10 minutes on a charger is all that you really need to go about a whole day out in the field. There's fast wireless charging too. You just can't beat real cabled fast charging. Real fast charging, especially when the fastest charger supported is in the box included in the price of the phone. You always gotta tack on a couple extra bucks when you're comparing something like this against a Samsung or an iPhone. We've seen a lot detailed about this phone specifically, but performance is spot on. This is a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, and it trades blows well with my OnePlus 12 and the Galaxy Note 24. There is no one single across the board fastest phone. In heavily CPU bound tasks, we're definitely going to see the MediaTek Dimensity 9300 pull ahead, especially that implementation in the current Vivo. I find there's slightly better support for graphics intense games with our Snapdragon chips, however. But if you start digging into really heavy compute tasks, this chip can eat up more of your battery faster than last year's Snapdragon. I'm happy that there isn't a huge compromise on battery capacity, but it is a smaller phone, so you have to expect slightly reduced runtime. There's also a general trend this year that chips might throttle more during the heaviest compute tasks, but I feel the majority of apps are going to benefit more from the additional burst horsepower that we have now than the few outlier situations where we might see more significant throttling. I have a full breakdown on the current phones out, performance tests and benchmarks and charts and graphs over on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. You can see all the results for video editing, podcast mixing, batch photo processing, and file compression. My testing posts and production diaries are Patreon exclusives, as I'm setting up every new phone and starting to break them in. But that brings us to the cameras, and this is one of the biggest changes year over year. The main wide camera and the telephoto both get larger sensors than what we had on the 13. And now, all three sensors are higher resolution quad Bayer setups. Oddly, the ultra-wide loses autofocus, which I think is a strange decision given how good the sensor is, but the telephoto picks up a more useful close focusing distance, and it's a lot better for macro shots. I'm so happy to be wrong. Like way back in the day, I used to be an ultra wide snob. I would say ultra wides were generally more useful than telephoto sensors on phones. These days I've become a bigger fan of improving these telephoto sensors. It's one area where the Xiaomi 14 absolutely embarrasses the dinky telephoto sensor on the S24. Ditto this new main camera. This is a fantastic new sensor from OmniVision, fighting directly against Samsung's best sensors on the Note 24 and the Pixel 8 Pro, but also taking a clear shot at the new Sony sensors found in OnePlus phones. The smaller premium Xiaomi is easily going toe-to-toe and often beating the best camera on the most expensive slate phone Samsung sells. The long and short of it, we have a new competitive player in the mobile space, and OmniVision. They came out of nowhere. They're putting Samsung and Sony on notice. As we start trying to wrap this up, I did a separate video on HyperOS, and a lot of my thoughts are better summed up there specifically. It's a lot like MIUI, and it's familiar for folks that have used Xiaomi devices for a while. I can't find any options for it. I just wish I could get back a more traditional app drawer. I really hate splitting quick toggles from notifications. I think that's kind of dumb. If I wanted a clumsy layout for my notifications, I would buy an iPhone. That's not why I use Androids, but I digress. This is all going to be dependent on regional pricing because not every region will be the same comparable price, but the Xiaomi is looking to offer better tech at similar prices, and in many areas also trying to undercut Apple and Samsung. I get a lot of comments in my videos, oh, but in my region, this phone is more than that phone. And you have to understand, you will not want to watch that video I would make where I go through every country on the planet and say, oh, the exchange rate for this phone in Bangalore is going to be this. But if you buy this phone in Taipei, it's gonna be that. I appreciate the feedback, but you have to understand, we have to cover this stuff broadly internationally. But let's say, for argument's sake, that this is the same price as a Samsung or an iPhone. The Xiaomi is going to win so many fights on better screen technology, better main and telephoto cameras, a 15% larger battery with substantially faster charging. The fastest charger is in the box, an infrared port to use this as a universal remote, and it's just a crazy hardware fight. Against Samsung, the S24 will win on DeX and slightly longer software support. I'm definitely being cheeky with the value proposition, but the fight is even worse for Apple. The iPhone 15 is just not competition for this phone at all. The tech features people are going to use every day. You pay a hefty Apple tax for kind of an average experience. Maybe that's what all of those tech reviewers keep talking about when they say average consumers. There doesn't seem to be any way to shake up the competition here in North America, so Samsung and Apple can kind of just stagnate together. I've always been a hardware guy more than a software guy, so I always have to highlight that as my personal preference in these videos, but I'm happy to trade a year or two of future updates to get a better performing device today with more progressive features. And the photography conversation is just getting silly. Apple and Samsung at significantly higher prices, not really beating these less expensive options. If I spent hundreds of dollars more on a phone, I would want to see that camera crush a cheaper phone. But Samsung and Apple don't seem motivated to step up there. The Xiaomi 14 is a champ. Now, we aren't making as many smaller premium tier phones. And this isn't, I mean, isn't it kind of funny? This isn't really a small phone, what used to pass as the medium size option a few years back. But it joins a dwindling list of options for people to shop. Where 2023 was a year for Androids to catch up on performance and battery life, 2024 seems to be a year of bringing more of the ultra expensive phone features down to more affordable prices. I'll have a lot more to share in a few more videos and articles on the Xiaomi 14, so stay tuned. And of course, I'm gonna leave some links down below for more information on the Xiaomi 14 and where you might be able to shop this where you live, since we can't get it here And it's kind of killing me. This thing is really nice. As always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing these videos, subscribing to the channel. All the support lately has been amazing. I can't thank you all enough if you're hitting my home site, SomeGadgetGuy.com, if you're clicking on links in my video description, or if you're joining the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon. That's patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This list is basically the coolest collection of tech pals in the universe, and they get exclusive access to all of my early testing, and then also my really big, long camera deep dive videos. Patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. These folks are basically the coolest, so I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy, basically everywhere. But these days, I'm trying to spend a bit more time on the Mastodons or sharing photos on the Flickrs, a little less so on the Facebooks and the Instagrams, and definitely not on the Twitters. And I will catch you all on the next video.